there is more in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy, Horatio. Hey there, friends on YouTube. It's the JTL. I'm back again, and today I'm going to start doing something a little different. I'm trying different things here on the channel. If you don't know already, I'm a big music fan. I've been a big music fan for my entire life. I like to go out and get records, and this past weekend I was out and doing some shopping. And I was able to pick up something that I'd had on CD for a while, but I'd been hoping to find on vinyl again. I was really excited to grab it. So what is it? The Zombies, Odyssey and Oracle. Now, if you don't know this record, it's probably best known for its single hit, "Time of the Season." But I want to make a little bit of an argument today. I've wrote a little bit of a video essay to make the argument that Odyssey and Oracle is perhaps better than the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper. So, let's get to it. Released in 1968, Odyssey and Oracle represents a near-perfect distillation of the 1960s musical zeitgeist, but it also draws on both the musical and cultural history of England in the way that few, if any, other bands, including the Beatles, ever did. Let me explain. The Beatles are arguably the best band to come out of England in the 1960s. They're arguably the best band to ever come out of anywhere. They were somehow able to distill the pop and soul, R&B of the United States, and then their influences as well from growing up in post-war England, both classical and popular and otherwise. Coupled with the breadth of knowledge that George Martin brought to the table, they eventually grew, beyond their more bubblegum roots and into a musical force impressive not only because of its scale in popularity, but also because of the leaps they were able to make stylistically. The pinnacle of their success, at least in the conventional wisdom, is Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. The LP sort of tore through style and convention, turning what had been up to that point known as rock and roll. They expanded the palette into a much broader range of instrumentation and musical thought processes than had ever been imagined to that point. Of course, they weren't the first people to go beyond two guitars, bass, and drums. The Beach Boys had been experimenting around the same time in different ways, both with their love of Phil Spector's wall of sound, but also art music and film scoring, like folks like Henry Mancini. But the Beach Boys were always kind of quintessentially somehow American, while the Beatles have been looked at as their counterpoint on the other side of the ocean. To briefly make this case for the Zombies, Odyssey and Oracle, I'm not going to go through every single song and talk about everything. I'm going to hit a few points to make a few points, and I really encourage you to go out and listen to the record for yourself. So bear with me a minute. If you disagree with me, you can disagree with me down in the comments. We'll have a robust conversation. Hear me out. Odyssey was recorded in 1968 in both Abbey Road and Olympic Studios in London. The track listing doesn't contain a ton of hits. Time of the Season is really the only song that had any success off of the record, and the record itself wasn't really looked at as a big hit. It sort of went unnoticed when it was released in 1968. But the songs, I guess they weren't really well suited for popular success, for radio success, because of their variety in both style and in subject matter. A case in point, Care of Cell 44. This is the opening track, and it starts out with kind of a buoyant dance hall piano that launches us into a bouncy song that is somehow relating to us a woman preparing a bedroom for her son, maybe coming home from being in prison. It's kind of opaque. You never really quite know what the song is about. Relationships aren't clear, the circumstances aren't clear, but the emotions that are present for the characters are there. The bittersweet tenor of those emotions juxtaposes nicely against the bouncy, almost sing-along feel of the music. The second song we move to is A Rose for Emily, which I can only assume is named for the William Faulkner short story of the same name. If you know anything about that story, it in its own right is a little gothic and creepy. If you don't know that story, I encourage you to read it. It's a great story. But again, here in the song by the Zombies, we're met with an opaque view of a world and characters filled with a kind of longing and a British reserve that seems to keep everything at arm's length. This will be a theme throughout the record. The musical palette is replete with mellotron, piano, other keyboard instruments, including harmonium on Butcher's Tale, Western Front 1914. But again, the events and characters, the setting, they're all slippery. Just when you think you've got a grasp on the narrative and you know what's going on, it slips away and morphs into something different. As the album progresses, this effect is never far from the center of the songs. The instrumentation, the playing, the arrangements, while drawing on the expected sort of psychedelic toolbox, are almost muted in comparison to some of its contemporaries. This has kind of got a Baroque feel to it almost, like chamber music of some kind. There's a strange angular darkness to the record that takes hold. I always leave this record feeling like I've just walked through a British town where I'm passing windows and conversations are happening, and you get a view into the lives of other people while never quite actually getting familiar enough to understand what's happening. So you're always sort of off kilter. It's funny, but Time of the Season, the last song on the record, is kind of the odd song out here. It feels a little tacked on. It doesn't have the same vibe as the rest of the songs on the record. It might be the thing that initially draws a listener to the album, but it is not really a part of what I consider the album itself. That's not to take away from the song. I mean, it's a fine song. Maybe a little worse for wear because it's been used as a nostalgia touchstone for baby boomers in films and commercials and all the stuff, all the terrible things we do to our music. But it just doesn't have that joy and menace that the rest of Odyssey has. This is where it separates itself from Sgt. Pepper for me. While Pepper leads the listener on a similar kind of journey in the course of the listen, it feels safe by comparison. While Sgt. Pepper is orchestrated and twisted to the point of its own kind of wonder, it seems to stay safely outside of engaging any real emotions. She's Leaving Home and Maybe a Day in the Life are exceptions to that. But by and large, I feel like Sgt. Pepper is a showcase for what the Beatles were able to do at that point in their career. And they're stretching their legs and exploring, but they're not engaging real emotion. And maybe that's not what the Beatles are about. I mean, the Beatles are my favorite band. Make no mistakes about it. But when it comes to emotional depth, they don't really get there very often. Sgt. Pepper also gives us a pastiche of post-war Britain, but it does it in a way that doesn't really have any hook. There's no blood lost in their representation of that post-war Britain. Odyssey and Oracle, much like James Joyce's Dubliners, seems to strip its characters and their lives bare in a way while not really allowing the listener to get close. You can feel the emotion, you can empathize with those characters. The treatment of the characters is not unkind. It doesn't hide anything. And that for me is why I make this argument. You know, Odyssey and Oracle is a pretty overlooked record. I mean, people who are big music fans, people who are fans of this era of music, people who have spent years becoming knowledgeable about it, they know the record. Lots of musicians were inspired by the record and love the record. But it doesn't really come up often in conversations like this, where we get to that kind of measuring of, you know, this record's better than that record. And it's kind of a pointless exercise, but it's a way that we compare and contrast and try to understand these touchstones in our cultural lives. The mid-1960s and the music of the mid-1960s is a huge part of that cultural landscape. I encourage you guys to go out and check out Odyssey and Oracle if you don't have it already. If you are a fan, if you already know the record well, let me know what you think down in the comments. let me know if you like this kind of video, because these are the kind of things that I'm really interested in over and above reviewing audio gear and that kind of stuff. I'd love to keep doing it. I'd love to know if you're interested. So leave me a comment down below. If you did like this video, then I'd appreciate a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, tell me why in the comments. And if you want to see more content like this and check out more of my channel, hit the subscribe button and get notified whenever I put anything else up. There'll be something else up, sometime later on this week. Thanks for taking the time to listen to me ramble on. And until the next time, this is the JTL, and I am out.